So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presentation of the day from Yannis, Vatis and Efterpi Emmanouilidou. Like most of us, until the pandemic, pretty much all of my teaching was face-to-face. I played around with different techniques and dabbled with a bit of flipped classroom and workbook-based learning. But essentially, most of it involved me stood up front speaking to a lecture theatre or classroom of medical students, ranging from the really switched on engaged to the so unbothered they were still in bed because, you know, they had Google and Wikipedia. Come the pandemic, I suddenly had to prepare some sessions for online delivery, which was a whole new challenge. But even then, with a short turnaround time and a massive workload, I mostly just did something that replicated the face-to-face event in either a live or pre-recorded online session. But in this not really post-pandemic world, we're moving into a whole new situation whereby we face the possibility of hybrid, simultaneous face-to-face and online sessions. Frankly, that prospect seems daunting. So I'm really pleased that Yannis and Efterpi are here to introduce us to some techniques that can make these hybrid sessions a great success. So over to you, Yannis and Efterpi.
So hello to everyone. My name is Efterpi and I am a learning technologist for the UH Sussex Foundation Trust. And I will be joining you to present with Yannis Vatis, my line manager, a presentation about hybrid teaching and how hybrid teaching can be incorporated into our everyday practice. Very nice to meet you all. Yannis, could you introduce yourself also?
Yes. Hi everyone. Sorry, my Zoom crashed. Yes, I'm Yannis Vatis. I'm the senior learning technologist for the TEL team of University Hospital Sussex, and we're both Efterpi and I were really excited to be sharing with you our findings regarding hybrid teaching, which we know is a pretty hot button topic ever since the pandemic has started. How do we accommodate people who are remotely coming into our sessions and are physically there at the same time? But hopefully we can provide you with some solutions for this. So to kick things off, I'm going to share my screen real quick. And I will hand off to Efterpi to start things out. So yeah, Efterpi, this is all you.
Yes. So today we are going to discuss with you about applications of hybrid teaching, what is its benefits, what is its pitfalls, how we can overcome those pitfalls and successfully incorporate hybrid teaching into our everyday practice. So if we can move on to the next. Yeah, the first thing that we will need to do here is to define what hybrid teaching is and what it is exactly about. So hybrid teaching is mainly an educational model that allows some students to attend our class in person, while some others join us remotely from home. So it is a combination of having people into the physical classroom and having people that we teach joining us through their computers. To employ hybrid teaching, educators use video conference hardware like Zoom or Teams or anything that has to do with video, and software to teach remote and in-person students. So while we teach through hybrid teaching, we need to use technology to help us guide this teaching and to help have everyone into the classroom, either physically, either joining us from home. So we would like to also discuss the benefits of hybrid teaching, because it is very important for us to know how hybrid teaching can actually help us when we use it into our everyday practice and into our classroom. There are some benefits to hybrid teaching that can really help us elevate the quality of our teaching and the quality of learning for students. So it is important for us to know which ones are those. First things first, hybrid teaching can provide training flexibility for shift-based staff. We all know that it is a reality when it comes to medical education or when it comes to people who work in shifts in hospital in general, that there is a very short time on their part that they need to be flexible, that they need to complete some trainings, but at the same time, the time is very, very short. So hybrid teaching gives those people the opportunity to join us via their homes or via where they have their seats at the time, while other ones join us physically. And this is a very important flexibility to ensure that they continue to be motivated and they continue to know that they can join us at any time from at any place. Another very big advantage from hybrid learning and hybrid teaching is that it offers some custom design learning activities for diverse student groups. One basic advantage from hybrid teaching is the flexibility that it offers so that we can approach those students that need a little bit more diverse approach. Hybrid teaching is a very good tool to use in combination with other methods, and it gives us the opportunity to create these sources that can help people that need differentiated teaching to use them and to actually be motivated and be there for their learning and to actually understand what it is that we are teaching them. Another very important advantage is that it can increase student engagement. So this is something that happens when hybrid teaching is combined with other methods of teaching like the flipped classroom or with blended learning or with other modes of teaching that are very important for people to stay engaged. When people feel that they can join us from any place and that they actually can learn through practice into hybrid teaching, they can stay engaged. And this is because when we employ hybrid teaching, we mainly think of teaching people the theory, the theoretics and the base before the actual lesson, and using our course, using our lesson to incorporate practice into there and incorporate some exercises. So people become engaged when they know what the course is going to be about. They become engaged when they know the theory behind it, and when they come into our lesson and into our practice to actually practice whatever they have learned beforehand. And another main benefit is that it minimizes the teaching time. So again, one thing that I will have to touch upon is the flipped classroom approach that we can use in combination with hybrid teaching. The flipped classroom approach is an approach that helps us teach the theoretics before we actually have our lesson. So we either post the theoretics, anything that has to do with theory beforehand. We send it to our students so that they can know and learn what it is that we will be talking about. And we use the lesson time to help them practice and exercise on whatever it is that we have taught them beforehand. So that gives us the opportunity to minimize the teaching time, to devote less time into discussing the theory and more time when it comes to practice and exercising what it is that we want to teach. And the final one is that it allows students to self-pace. Again, if we combine hybrid teaching with the flipped classroom approach, if we combine it with showing people the theory before we actually have them in our course, this will help them learn the theory in their own pace, in their own time. And this is a very big help for people who face anxiety, who face stress, who feel that they cannot cope with how many things they have to learn, because it helps them self-pace and it helps them understand what it is that they need to know before they come into our own lesson. Of course, those benefits are general, and what it is important for us is to know how we can use those benefits for us, how we can use those benefits for our teaching, because every benefit is something generic, but we need to find the ways to make it ours, to incorporate it in our teaching. So first of all, some hybrid teaching elements, the ones that we have talked about before, like reversing the lecture, using the theory before the practice, using the flipped classroom at home, and adding some homework elements in class. So adding what we would normally assign our students to learn after class into our classroom, into our lesson, leads to higher academic achievement. The main reason for that is that it gives people the opportunity to solve some queries and some questions that they would normally have at home into the lesson. So our students come to us having some questions, having read the theory, having understood what it is that they have to read. And then during our practice and during our lesson, they have the opportunity to solve those queries. They have the opportunity to address what it is that they don't understand, to see how they work through the practice and through the exercises, and actually engage with the course. This is what it leads to higher academic achievement, because it gives people the opportunity to practice. Another thing is that if we combine hybrid teaching and the traditional classroom, this is the way that we can actually have the highest motivation from students. Some very recent surveys and research that has been done in dental students from 2017 and later showed that students highly favored the combination of hybrid teaching and traditional classroom. Anyone who wants those references and those sources, we can send to you everything that we found based on research after this presentation. But it is important for us to know that it's not only hybrid teaching that can bring about those benefits. It's hybrid teaching in combination with traditional classroom or flipped classroom approach or other types of approaches. What it gives then is the combination of this basic and traditional method with newest methods that makes a great combination. Another way that we can benefit our teaching from it is that we can integrate technology. When we integrate technology in our teaching, we have the opportunity for innovation, because when we have to teach using technology and showing our students what our course is about, we have to integrate the newest pieces of technology, which helps us innovate more and more whatever it is that we are teaching, helps us innovate when it comes to our sources and when it comes to anything that we use to teach our students. So this is the opportunity for innovation. And there are also some practical benefits, which I believe that are one of the most important benefits when it comes to hybrid teaching. And this is that it saves time and it saves space. We all have been in situations where we are trying to fit everything and we are trying to learn, but there is not enough time or there is not enough rooms, because when it comes to face-to-face teaching, there is a practical restriction that most of the times the space is limited. So hybrid teaching was mainly used in the post-COVID era so that it can actually combine those issues and save some time and save some space for people. But there are also some pitfalls in hybrid teaching that we also believe that it is best to talk about, and it is best to acknowledge what is going on, because even though hybrid teaching can have very big benefits for us, it also can have some pitfalls, and it is important for us to know and understand what those pitfalls are and how we can actually overcome them. So what we first need to do is to acknowledge the elephant in the virtual room. So acknowledge what is going on and why people are actually so afraid of hybrid teaching. Hybrid teaching is a very beneficial mode of education, but at the same time, it can be hard for educators. So it can be restrictive for educators, and this is why instructors normally resist. There is a very big element of fear behind hybrid teaching because it combines some elements that can usually make people feel uncomfortable, like using technology in their everyday lesson, having to combine their attention to both the students that are into the classroom and the students that are virtually joining us, having to find ways to engage everybody. And those are very scary situations, and it is very normal for people who are instructors to feel that they cannot cope with this, and they feel that they need to find another way of teaching. Yes. So another issue is the hardly regulated digital resources. We live in an era that the scope of digital resources that we can have and how many resources we can use is endless. And that means that we need to be able to choose which are the resources that we need here. And we need to be able to choose what are the best resources to use. This is a very big responsibility, a responsibility that has shifted from the university to the instructor and even to the students themselves. So this is another element that causes fear to the instructor. It is another element that causes resistance. And it's very hard to regulate those digital resources, and it's very hard to use them when the student levels of digital literacy is low. This is another very big issue. The low digital literacy of students is a very big issue because it is one thing for us to have those resources and another thing for people to know how to use them. It is very, very common for us to be in a situation where we teach people that really do not know how to use technology. This is very influenced also by the demographics of the classroom that we are teaching in. We have seen that some students who are over a certain age or are not that accommodated into using technology may face difficulties when it comes to hybrid teaching, especially when they join us from their homes, because they do not actually know how to use those activities and those resources that we provide them. And this is a situation that causes stress and anxiety. So it is important to acknowledge that, and it is important to take steps into letting our students know what it is that we are talking about. And another very important thing is that hybrid teaching has extensive costs for everyone involved. This is also something that we need to acknowledge, because hybrid teaching is a very good practice. It is a very beneficial practice, but it is important for us to know that both for organizations like universities, for example, there is going to be a cost of equipment. And this cost of equipment also influences the instructor, who most of the time has to elevate whatever it is that they are using. And it also escalates to the students who also needs to be equipped with certain equipment. And this is not something that is easy for everyone. This is not something that is accessible to everyone. So it is important for us to know and understand that those extensive costs may influence how people react to hybrid teaching. And well, after acknowledging those elephants in the room and what are the main reasons of resistance and what are the main reasons that people may not be that engaged with hybrid teaching, it is also very important to understand what are the disadvantages that we may face and what are the issues that we may face, the pitfalls that is very easy for us to have. So the first one is the split teacher attention. This resonates with the resistance of instructors that we have talked about before. It is very hard for teachers to focus their attention to two diverse groups. They need to focus their attention both to the group of students that are into the classroom and to the group of students that join us from home. So this creates a split attention effect where the teacher can focus in only one of the two groups. This can be very hard for people to regulate, and this is normal because it is not something that we are taught how to do. We are not taught how to actually engage with two different audiences. So we need to find ways to eliminate the split attention, and Yannis is going to touch upon that more shortly. Another issue that we can have is isolation of our audience members. It is no lie that hybrid teaching can cause some difficulties in group work, as we need to create groups of people that work together, even though they join us from two different places. We need to find those activities that can apply both to the group of people that join us from home and to the group of people that join us from our physical classroom. And at the same time, we need to find ways that those two diverse groups can actually work together and they can combine whatever it is that it is to know. This is something that needs a lot of preparation on our side. There are some main challenges when it comes to collaborative and practical tasks there. This also is caused by the difficulty into working in group work, and it is hard for us to actually create those tasks that can become collaborative and practical when people are joining us from different places. It is also hard to have practical tasks because the equipment that people have when they come into the classroom may be different from the equipment that people have when they stay at home. We need to be sure that the resources are the same, both for the one group and for the other. And this, of course, can cause some challenges. And generally, the setup for our course can be suboptimal. This is a situation that is caused from all of those three previous pitfalls. And it is a situation that can disadvantage our teaching, that it can cause stress both to us and to our students when we have this setup that it is hard to regulate and it's hard to actually use to have the best academic achievement possible. And now that we talked about all of those pitfalls, and we have to also talk about what are the issues that we may face and the advantages of hybrid teaching, it is time to talk about how we can overcome those pitfalls, how we can step back and see what is going on with this situation and how we can overcome all of those issues that we have. It is important to say here that hybrid teaching is an educational model that can go really well, really easy, and it can go really bad, really easy also. So to talk to you about overcoming those pitfalls, I will now address Yannis. So Yannis, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Efterpi. So thanks for all of that. And yes, we wouldn't be just throwing problems at you without any solutions. And that's what I am going to do now, is I'm going to provide you with a few tips and a few solutions that you can use to make hybrid teaching a better situation for yourself and for your learners. And this is coming from a couple of years now of experience where we have had to implement either hybrid teaching or blended learning for our trust specifically. And it's solutions that even our library knowledge service instructors have employed as well. So the first thing I would say that is quite critical to do in order to ensure a smooth situation for your learners and for yourself is to set up a session landing page. Now, what this basically means is this is a persistent online destination where your learners and yourself can always refer to for anything involving your session. This landing page should contain everything that your learners would need to know about your session, everything they would need in order to attend the session, including things like the meeting link that you will be using, the material that they will need to engage with, and even any other tools or instructions that they need to know about. So it's a handy place that you can always refer to for anything. For instance, if you're running a session where they need to do some group work and they need to use some material, you can include a link to a cloud folder from where they can download all of their materials from. You can make a landing page like this with a variety of free and easy to use tools out there. An example is Padlet. Padlet is I would say, some people would say it's a collaborative board. I would say it's more like a Swiss Army knife for anything you would need to do to make collaborative work in a classroom. And it works very well for setting up a landing page. An example from us has been from our nursing department when they were when they needed to rapidly redeploy nurses to deliver COVID vaccines. They needed a place where all of the nurses could refer to no matter where they were, when it came to their training or knowing anything about this new vaccine that they may not know about. So we set up a Padlet that we deployed onto our learning management system, and nurses knew where to go immediately to go find all the information that they needed. And this makes it a perfect situation for a hybrid teaching classroom. If you have a student who's running late or they don't know where the meeting link is, for example, they can immediately go there and click it. Another platform you can use is Adobe Spark. This is a free platform that Adobe has set up where you can create a variety of things, including small websites. And it's very easy to use. There is no coding involved or anything like that. It is a great platform to use for creating landing pages, because not only do you create the website, you can also host it there, and you can share the link from there very easily with your learners. And any updates you make to the page are real time. So once you have made an update, you could just reshare it, and the persistent link that you've given them is always the same. Google Classroom is another amazing free platform made by Google, which operates in a way like a small learning management system. What's great about Google Classroom is that not only can you host a lot of files and do homework and provide some level of analytics to your learners, you can also make regular updates. So it's kind of like creating a mini social media platform for your classrooms. And finally, another place where you can do landing pages is on a learning management system, if that is available to you from your organization. Like for us, for example, we use Totara, and landing pages are a thing that are deployed very, very often for courses that are run from our trust. Now, the next way to overcome a lot of these pitfalls is, like Efterpi has touched on many times, is using a blended or flipped classroom approach. While there is, if you can look at the picture at what the difference is between a traditional classroom and a flipped classroom, there is a place where you can do lecturing. There are certain situations where lecturing is pretty good, but the thing about flipped classroom is that it enables you to make things a bit more interactive. And as we've described already, some of the biggest pitfalls about hybrid teaching is that your remote learners can sometimes be very isolated. So while in a physical classroom, people can hear you, people can be more engaged with you, even in a lecturing situation. For people who are remote, this can be a bit more isolating and make them feel like they just go into passive mode, essentially. So a flipped classroom works very nicely. For the primary reason that remote learning is primarily a communicative task situation. So because you're using video conferencing setups like Zoom, like we're doing right now, or using Teams, it's perfect for doing communicative tasks, which involve discussions, that involve debates, involve conversations. And flipped classroom approach works for this because you could just focus on the discussions in your classroom while you're offloading the bulk of your theory online. So by telling your learners to either do some research on a topic, or you provide them the material beforehand and you give them some kind of work to do beforehand, they're going to be prepared to come into a classroom situation, whether they're remote or physically there, to prepare to discuss and to engage with each other and see what they've come up with from their findings. It's important primarily when you're doing this, when you're telling them to do some work beforehand, to give them some kind of task to do. Don't just tell them, go read this website, watch this video, and come to class. Give them something to do with that, or else you're going to get a bunch of people who probably will find whatever reason not to do the reading or the viewing. But giving them a task gives them something physical that they can bring to the class, whether they're remote or in the physical space. One thing to note here is to always prepare your participants with some kind of session guide. They need to know why you are giving them the material beforehand and why they need to do it and why they need to do the task. They need to be given generally a roadmap of what the session is going to play out like, so they understand why they need to do their bit of it. The thing that scares a lot of people about the flipped classroom is that they're going to end up needing to go into lecture mode because most people didn't do the work beforehand. And this is very natural because a lot of learners are still used to the classic sage on the stage kind of teaching situation where the teacher is the gatekeeper of all knowledge and just gives it all right there and then. So they don't feel they need to prepare beforehand. But if you give them a guide, if you set that expectation beforehand, they understand how it's going to work, and then they can engage with the flipped classroom the way that you've designed it. And finally, make copious use of the aforementioned landing page. That is where you can always refer to at all times, no matter what happens in your classroom. The next thing to keep in mind is to always remember to keep your house in order. And what we mean by this is always make sure that you have some kind of housekeeping slide or document where you are explaining to your learners what are the, let's say, rules or guidelines for your session. This is something that can include things like, putting yourself on, reminding your learners to put themselves on mute if they're coming in remotely, or to ensure that they have all the materials they're supposed to have on hand, reminding also your physical learners that there are people who are remote, so maybe they need to speak up a little bit more. The other thing that you can do to keep your house in order, so to speak, is to make sure that all of your learners, whether physically there or remotely, are actually there. And one way to achieve this with your remote learners is to ask them to do a couple of things, maybe in the chat or by unmuting themselves or revealing their camera for a little bit. They can say hi. Another cool thing that you can do is ask them a question like, how are you feeling today? Post an emoji or a GIF showing how you feel today. And that could be a bit fun and can build some engagement between remote learners and physical learners because they'll see on the screen what the reactions are. Another thing to do is to always, to keep your house in order, is to provide instructions when it comes to asking questions, interrupting, or responding. Well, if you're in a physical classroom, you know how to do that. You traditionally raise your hand or you say, excuse me, you know how to interrupt in that situation. But for a remote learner, the rules are completely different. So you need to provide them with a gateway towards either interrupting you or asking questions, or maybe just feedbacking on something that you asked. It's very easy to get into that mode where the physical learner is the most important element, which is why we need to have nice rules that also apply to the remote learners, so they know how to also engage with you and not just end up only being the physical learners who are asking the questions. And also, before starting your session, spend a minute or two, spend a couple of minutes before your session starts to quickly run through how it's all going to work, and so just so that they're aware of what to expect and they're better prepared. Another thing, and this is something that kind of flies under the radar for a lot of people, is that you need to treat the camera that you're going to be using for your session as a person. So one thing that mainly people don't really seem to realize is that the camera lens is kind of like the eyes of your audience. So as a teacher or an instructor, you're kind of used to looking at your learners in the eyes. And that's the same thing you need to do with the camera, because the camera is the representation of the people who are not in the session over there. The lens specifically is what you need to treat as the eyes, the gateway to their soul, so to speak. So it's important while you're addressing your learners in the physical space to also address the camera in front of you right over there. So if I'm looking directly at the lens right there, it's like I'm looking at you specifically. And that's how you need to make your learners who are remote feel as well. Some tricks to help out to get you in that mode where you're treating the camera like a physical person is you can stick some stickers of eyes or googly eyes on the sides of your lens. This can be a fun little quirk and could be funny to even address to your physical learners, like, hey, this is Steve or Anna, if you want to call them that, or it's just everybody who's at home right now. Another thing you can do is put a doll or a figure on top of your camera, if possible, if it's not a tiny camera and you can put something up there. I've seen people even put like a little Lego figure, which is quite quirky. And another thing, if possible, you need to be able to try and position your webcam at eye level. So it's one thing to have a camera that's above, which kind of gives you a bit of a bird's eye view. And that can be a bit isolating for people. It's like they're just observing something happening underneath them. It doesn't make them feel like they're present in there. And if it's lower, which is very unusual, but if it's lower, again, it kind of gives that feeling that they're not really a part of the classroom. So trying to keep the camera as at eye level as possible is a very important trick to use in order to make your remote learners feel like they're actually there. So for the next bit to making your hybrid teaching as engaging as possible is to use actual learning tools. And what I mean by tools is not physical tools, but digital tools. Digital tools are apps that can help learners engage by adding a bit of interactivity. Now, this is something that's easy to achieve in a physical classroom when you're asking questions to people, and you could just quickly ask, how many of you feel this way? And people raise their hands. But you can actually make this a proper polling situation by using certain tools for this. So an interesting way to do this is, like I said, with polling, which can springboard into discussions that can later lead to breakout rooms or group discussions. You can achieve this by using tools like Slido, or a tool like Mentimeter. These are both apps that can do this. You can set up polls with different types of questions, such as multiple choice questions. You can use ranking questions. There's a whole host of things you can do with these tools, and they're actually not very expensive to acquire either. Another way is to add interactivity to your slides. Now, we all know that slides and PowerPoint, it's not the most engaging piece of technology you can use. It's pretty cool for presenting things like I'm doing, but it doesn't actually have any interactivity in and of itself. But what you can do is give PowerPoint some superpowers by using a tool like Nearpod. Nearpod will allow you to take a PowerPoint that you have or a Google Slides that you have and give it some interactive elements, including questions, including little games that they can use, little collaborative tasks. And these can be done by people who are both present in the classroom and remote from home. One very cool little activity you can add from Nearpod is called the Draw It activity, where you could just ask learners to draw something on their screen, and that can then be showcased as feedback during your class. Like, you could start off by asking, how are you feeling today? Just draw how you're feeling, and then you can just see how people react to that. It's there's some very nice stuff that you can use with Nearpod, and again, it's not a very expensive tool to acquire either. One of the most critical things to remember about hybrid teaching is to always be trying to get feedback from your learners. When I say feedback, the way we mean it in teaching is not just talking to them about things, but more like trying to get them to be a part of this process of teaching and learning. You ask questions and get responses. You use things like concept checking or instruction checking questions to make sure that they're understanding you or that they're getting the concept that you're giving them. And you can leverage all of these tools to do exactly that. Now, the final thing I want to get into, and this is very important if you want to ensure that your hybrid teaching is great for your learners, is to always be surveying them. Always make sure that you back from them on how the session went and how they felt about it. I know that it's a very scary prospect for a teacher to ask their learners to tell them how they felt about the session. However, this is your strongest ally. It is the thing that is going to essentially elevate your session. So don't be afraid to ask them about how they felt and what you could do better, especially your remote learners. Keep track of the responses to also measure your improvement over time to see that you are actually hitting those high notes, because learners are all very different. So it's nice to also start building up a bag of tricks that you can use in order to improve your sessions or adapt them to different types of learners or different splits of classes between remote and physical. You can use surveying tools such as SurveyMonkey. You can use Microsoft Forms if your organization uses Microsoft. A free one that you can use is Google Forms, which is available to pretty much everyone. Slido is also a great surveying tool of it in and of itself. Yeah, sure. And that is our lot for the day. Thank you very much for listening to us, and we'll take any questions you might have. I'm just going to put
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Efterpi and Yannis. That was really interesting. I can see there's loads of questions. I've got quite a few questions myself, but I'll hand over to Isla to just run through some questions from the floor and give you priority. But that was really amazing. I'm off to go and get some little eye stickers for my laptop camera, I think. That was an excellent idea. So Isla, would you just like to out some of the questions from the floor?
So many. I've tried to cluster them so that when similar sorts of questions have come together, just to be able to get through as many as possible. Mobile technology, people joining in from their phones, from iPads or tablets rather than laptops or desktops. How does that whole thing work with a hybrid session when people are using a mix of different resources and tools to be able to join the session?
That's an excellent question, because it's actually part of the situation that you want to have. You want them to have that flexibility to be able to use whatever device they want to. And in an ideal world, you want your learners to be coming in from a computer, because that means that they can share screens during breakout rooms and stuff, but that's not always going to be the case. So I think it's important to prepare yourself for a mix of devices. So you want to encourage your learners to be able to phone in. Let's say they're a nurse in a ward, they have 30 minutes to join your session. All they have is a phone. They should not be isolated. So they should have that option to be able to join your session even that way. You're usually going to have a mix of people who are coming in from their homes, so you can make sure that your breakout groups are set up in a way so at least one person can share their screen if necessary. But if you know that your learners are going to probably be coming in from different devices, maybe you may not want to expect them necessarily to use their share screen function. But this is where your landing page can come in handy, because if your materials are all there on the landing page, nobody needs to share anything. And Padlet is also a great tool to use, because every changes they do in collaborative work on it is done in real time. And that's something that's true for most tools, most collaborative tools right now, including Google Docs, Microsoft Word, and all of these tools all have like these collaborative features that are real time. So screen sharing is primarily the main barrier when it comes to mobile devices. But I feel with the collaborative work aspect of most tools, this can be overcome just fine.
Thank you so much. So much of this feels like you need more than one person managing the session. There's a lot of stuff to juggle. There's a lot of stuff going on. What is the type? Is that something that you're finding that it's? I mean, you need either an exceptionally talented single person, or that you need two people in every hybrid session.
Can I pick up to this question, Yannis?
Absolutely, I was going to say.
All right. First of all, one thing that I believe that it is very important for us to make sure that you know, and that we communicate this to you, is that we have given you all of those tools and all of those suggestions, and this is what they are suggestions. We are very, very aware of how hard it can be for one person to handle all of this situation, and how easy it can be to lose track of it. But what I would say here is that first of all, it is important for you to take from this presentation whatever you feel that it works for you, and maybe start with one or two of those suggestions, and then based on how you are feeling with it, to start incorporating more, or say that this doesn't work for me, I leave this behind. It's not a situation where everything works for everyone. So right now, when it comes to just one person using those stuff, my main focus, if I had to pick some of those things, would be preparation and feedback. when I'm talking about preparation, I'm talking about feeling sure that what you have as resources is there, and maybe have your theory before your lesson so that you can manage all of the disruptions that you may have during the lesson physically and at this time. Feedback is very, very important because it will give you a very good overview of what it is that went well and what it is that didn't. So when you're finishing your course, when you're finishing your lesson, you can use this feedback through Slido, through Padlet, through some interactive resources so that you know what went well and what didn't. It is not obligatory for anyone to use all of those resources or to be able to understand all of those resources at once. We all start from somewhere and then we elevate our points and we reach. And just to share with you my personal experience, I started with hybrid teaching when I was teaching to 11-year-old children. Believe me, the first times it was a chaos. It was just bad. we all have to start from somewhere and then see what are our resources, what it is that we can do and how we can take it one step further. None of us is a superhero. We all need to know what our strengths are and build onto them.
That's lovely. Thank you for that.
If you don't mind, I'd like to address something that I actually saw in the chat pertaining to feedback. I feel, first of all, yes, thank you guys for talking very much about survey fatigue. It's something that I'm experiencing a lot because I work with a lot of tools and I manage the team. So I'm getting constant emails requesting feedback on all of the things that we use. And it's not pretty. I understand that. So yes, I did see an idea that in the chat about using informal surveying, and that is actually probably going to be your next best bet. An example of this I can give from my previous career teaching English was there was a teacher who would ask her students at the end of each session to just draw up 1 or 2 stars for several pieces of the feedback that she needed, and also provide just a comment on something that they believed she could improve on, just a single thing. So this was more of an informal thing that she was requesting every now and then, and it actually helped her engage and understand her learners at a deeper level without needing to tell them, please fill out this 20-question survey right over here. So yes, looking at ways to do informal feedback, like even leveraging tools like Slido, could actually help you achieve that.
Fantastic. There was quite a discussion about different levels of digital literacy, typing being a struggle, getting onto Teams, what screen sharing and what I don't know how to do this, plus issues of bandwidth. Sometimes people can't screen or can't turn on their cameras and as well as speak because just bandwidth is an issue. Sometimes 6 students in the same house, suddenly bandwidth becomes an issue. And there's so many different challenges hitting people now as well. It's just so many different things. Unreliable electricity supply, depending on where your students are actually physically located around the world. So challenging to manage people with, I mean, we touched on the mobile device versus desktop, but digital literacy skills as well is going to be an issue. And I'm going to I'm going to link in obviously accessibility at the same time. How many of these tools have gone through accessibility? If you're using Padlet and it's changing all the time, how does a screen reader deal with that? What are the accessibility issues as well as the digital literacy issues and how to? There's a lot to unpack in that. So I apologize, there's a lot going on with that. There's a lot going on in the chat. So digital literacy challenges and accessibility challenges.
I will take this as a step-by-step approach. I will take this just one at a time so that I can try to answer everything. So when it comes to digital literacy, what I would recommend in these cases is that because of course we cannot cater to everyone, we want to cater to everyone, but at times it can feel very hard to cater to everybody's needs and actually understand what it is that people know and what it is that they don't know. So one thing that I would suggest here is to have some basic sources that we use in maybe every lesson, or that we make them a habit so that we kind of teach people how to use, like the tools that Yannis was talking about, like Slido and Padlet. Those are tools that can be taught in a relatively quick way. So if we create this, let's just say pool of resources that we are using in every course, and we have some standards, we give these people this predictability of what it is that we can use, and we actually teach our learners how to use that. Of course, there are going to be some resources that are harder for people to use, but it is really important for us to give very clear information of what we expect, what it is that we expect people to do in this situation. Like, I am giving this tool to you, you will follow this and this and this step, and we expect you to do this. It is, of course, helpful to them if we know exactly what it is that we want and how we can teach via this tool. Now, and of course, it is not that this is going to solve all of our problems at once, not at any case, not at any level, but at least it is going to give us a base on how we can work through it and build on everybody's digital literacy. It is, of course, advisable to use tools that are relatively easier for people to understand, and tools that are using like basic resources like Padlet or Slido are easier for people to understand. Now, when it comes to accessibility, every tool that Yannis has talked to you about are also tools that we are using in the trust, and every tool that we are using in the trust has to be accessible to people because it is a legal obligation for us to follow accessibility rules. Both Padlet and Slido, for example, have as resources an accessibility checker into them. They have, when I'm talking about accessibility checker, I'm talking about a little icon that shows people, that explains to people why and how this tool becomes accessible. So they are both accessible to e-readers. I believe that the same goes for Nearpod, because Nearpod is an interactive tool, and it is, of course, important for us to have some audio instructions for all of our learners to cater to their needs. Generally, most of the tools that you can use, if you search for it, they have information based on how accessible they can be. And of course, we take a tool that can be accessible, and we can also build on it based on our learners' needs.
Really helpful, really, really helpful, and great to know that some of these things which look as if they might not be actually are more accessible than perhaps we realise. That's really helpful. There was questions about just time, struggling with time. If you're working full time and doing a course, everybody's got life obligations, everything else. Time management with a flipped classroom where you're wanting them to do lots of preparation ahead of arrival, does that impact in terms of the amount of contact time that you can have? Because there's only so much time the student has, and if every class is expecting lots of preparation before arrival, there's no time. Yeah, time management. How do you manage that whole concept of the class starts in the flipped side as well as in the face-to-face situation?
Yes, time is something that we all need, correct? But here's the thing is this, that we do find that the initial preparation development time of setting up your course or your session beforehand, that is where most of the time goes in. But once you have everything set up, we find that it's usually a lot faster to make tweaks to it later if you need to. But if everything is already set up, like your landing page, for example, or a course page, if you have access to a learning management system, these are all things that you can have pre-set up. And these tools allow you to duplicate these things if you need to. An example would be Google Classroom, where you can set up already a whole classroom situation with all of your materials, all of the sessions you're going to have in the future, and the materials are all there. And all you just need to tell your students is go to this link, go to this this file, that kind of thing. So when everything is pre-done, if you've done the bulk of the work beforehand, the rest of the preparation is actually a lot shorter. But it also takes getting used to as well.
It's actually the student time I was talking about.
Okay.
The design time and the preparation time, absolutely. I think that's a very important issue. But it was the student time. If their time spent reading stuff ahead and they also attend a class, it's that time. It's that sort of very valid point about the time spent designing.
That is fair enough. Yes. When it comes to the flipped classroom, the idea behind it essentially is to split the time that you would be spending in a classroom. So if you're going to run a 2-hour session, normally in a lecture style traditional classroom, you want to minimize that, but you also kind of want to do that by splitting the time down the middle. So for instance, if you were to expect your learners to do 30 minutes or 45 minutes of work before the session, and then your session is going to last another hour, you have already like minimized the time from 2 hours to 1:45, but you constantly want to also reduce that. But this is where we come back to talking about building also self-pacing, is that if you have given your learners ahead time in front of them, so it's not about telling them, hey, okay, I need you to do something today and then we'll have a session tomorrow. You need to give them a week, you need to give them a few days if possible to prepare. But you need to also set that expectation on how much time you would expect them to spend. If you tell them, I need you to research something cardiology related, that is a very broad thing to do. So you need to break it down a little bit for them, give them specific questions to answer, which is why I talked about building a task for them instead of just telling them, go research this, because they're going to spend an eternity researching something broad that you're giving them. But if you make a task that you have already calculated is going to take a certain amount of time, you can control that, keeping your learners' needs in mind and the jobs that they have already.
And I suppose perhaps also suggesting the time that they should be spending on this task. It shouldn't take you more than X number of minutes to complete this, or don't devote more than X number of minutes to this. Yeah. Thank you. So much discussion, so many really useful things that were coming out through the chat as well. I hope you get a chance to have a look through that too. But I'll pass back to Rick, but thank you very much. Really, really interesting session.
Right, thank you, Ida, and thank you very much, Efterpi and Yannis. That was really interesting. All I can say is, I mean, what an exciting time really to be out there teaching. It's fascinating seeing all these tools, the changing landscape. Absolutely incredible. Thank you. We're going to stop there now.